Your doctor's lab tests, frankly, are useless. And they're only designed to tell you what is happening and where in your body that it's actually happening, but the tests your doctor runs doesn't tell you anything about why this is happening to you, why you're sick, where your disease is coming from. It's a what and a where, never a why. If you want to actually get better, we need the why. And so I'm going to show you 3 different tests that your doctor should be running that, frankly, they never will. It's not even in their toolbox. I'm going to show you what these tests can do for you, how you can actually get them ordered for yourself, and how they can help you ultimately identify the root cause of your gut issues. Now, if you don't know me, my name is Josh Deck. I'm a Crohn's colitis specialist and physician's consultant for complex gut diseases like IBS, Crohn's, and colitis. And I do these videos so you can learn to heal your gut naturally. Because contrary to what your doctor has probably told you, you can heal your gut. It's not genetic and it's not random. So here's what we're going to talk about today. Doctors' labs, they're not useless, like I maybe have said, but they are fairly useless in the grand scheme of things. Here's the thing. They test very basic things. So your doctor's labs, like I said, they're doing the what and they're doing the where. So they might do something like when they're going into your blood. They'll typically do things what's called a CBC, or a complete blood count. So checking out your red cells and your white cells and all that stuff. They might even do something called a metabolic panel. Now, a metabolic panel is going to show things like electrolytes and all kinds of goodies inside of your body. Helpful, sort of, but think about blood work as it's a snapshot in time. And the problem with your doctor's blood work is they're getting a machine, literally running it into a machine to spit it out as quick as they can, which says, hey, you're within this range, you're normal. Here's the problem with your doctor's blood. Not only are they checking very basic stuff, maybe they'll check liver enzymes and whatever else, but they're looking in what's called a reference range. Now, the problem with a reference range is they put you in this box of high-low. For example, here's a laughable one. Men for testosterone here in Alberta, where I live, it's anywhere from 9 to 29. 9 to 29. That's a huge gap for testosterone. And this range covers 18 to 65 years old. So if you're 18 with a testosterone of 9, and that's standard for a 65-year-old man, they'll look at this literally, I'm not kidding, they'll say, well, it's on the low end, but you're normal, you're within range. Problem with the ranges your doctors are using is we know, based on the data, up to 92% of the entire population is metabolically unhealthy, which means their blood is not good. They're all sick. But they take the sample size, this population, and go, okay, well, out of the million people we have, here's the high and here's the low on average for standard deviation, blah, blah, blah. Here's the range we're using. Above that or below that, we have a problem. But if 92% of the population is sick, and that means that 92% of the samples they have are sick, therefore the data is wrong, and you're being compared to a normal of sick, not optimal. And so your doctors are just simply looking at, is it high or low? Is it red or is it green? That's all we need to know, otherwise you're fine. If it's high or it's low, here's a med. And they're managing it. Even the stool tests that they use are going to be very basic. They're checking for basic pathogens. They're looking for Shigella, E. coli, Salmonella, Varicella. They might check for some parasites with like a 1% accuracy, right? They'll check for calprotectin, which in stool, calprotectin is simply a byproduct of white blood cells. In fact, you have 5 different types of white blood cells, and there's one in particular called neutrophils. And these are very active in the world of IBD, so Crohn's colitis. Even some IBS can have this. But you have these neutrophils that are active. They produce byproducts. And these byproducts are called calprotectin. It's kind of like if you had a bunch of cars sitting in a parking lot and you measured the exhaust in the air, you get an idea of how many cars are actually in that parking lot without having to count. Same thing with calprotectin. Neutrophils, as a result of them being in the area, being active, the exhaust they produce is a protein called calprotectin. So they measure that and say, okay, here's how much activity, therefore your inflammation level, and that's sort of what they look to do. But this is the bare bones, most basic of data between blood work, which is inaccurate 92% of the time, between stool, which is just checking for active pathogens, so things that could immediately kill you like C. diff or something else, and they wash their hands of it. They give you a medication to manage your symptom. This is not the way to do healthcare. This is, by definition, sick care, because you're only managing sickness. You're not actually looking for root causes to heal the disease. And so I'm going to take you through 3 different tests that your doctor will never run, but you can ask myself or any functional clinician who understands these things to give you these labs. I'm going to give you 3 very simple ones. The tests are amazing, but the list is simple. So the first one is called an OAT. That stands for OAT, that's organic acid test. Now, organic acid test is something that my favorite one comes from, it's formerly Great Plains Labs. It's now called Mosaic Diagnostics. And I order them for a lot of my clients. They give us 76 different markers. And they're gonna help us measure things like bacterial overgrowth. Now, again, we can't say it's a urine test. So we're not getting your entire gut microbiome. But just like a car produces exhaust, all of your cells, be them bacteria, mitochondria, cells in your body that make up your everything, they produce exhaust. And we're going to call these organic acids. So these cells produce exhaust. They produce a byproduct that we can measure through urine. So we can see there's lots of things that bacteria produce. We can measure some of these markers to check specifically to see, hey, do you have an overgrowth of good guys or bad guys? Probably. We can check for certain strains of mold like Aspergillus fusarium type molds. There's an umbrella there. We can see some of those markers. We can even see candida and fungus inside. There's a byproduct called arabinose that candida make. You know, you get a GI map and you go, oh, I don't have any candida. Of course not. Candida is a small intestine microbe. Your poop comes out of the large intestine. So if you're not getting candida on your stool sample, it just means it's not in your intestine yet. Now, I have had candida in my intestine, up in my mouth. It grew up and down. It was super severe. That's when I got lucky and tested it. But you can test negative on a stool but still have it very high on this organic acid. So if fungus is inflaming you, which is very common, it's a problem. This organic acid test also gives us markers for things like cellular health. We can see if you're detoxing properly. We can see what's called the Krebs cycle, all the way back to like high school biology. We can see markers of methylation and detoxification. We can see if your vitamins are high or low. They give us all kinds of amazing markers, which when we put them into context, we can see, oh, wait a minute. Here's where your root causes are. Here are the things that are contributing to or causing your bowel issues. The second test that we can look at, it's actually a conglomerate of tests. It's called a total tox or total tox burden. Now, a total tox burden actually consists of 3 main tests. The first is an HTMA. This stands for hair tissue mineral analysis. We literally take a snip of hair from your head, your pubes, your legs, wherever you want to get it, and you can send that in. And they analyze this for minerals and heavy metals. We can see through certain minerals, sodium, potassium, zinc, copper, we can see what your adrenals are doing if your body's having trouble detoxing. We can see if there's direct heavy metals influencing your immune system for the worse. We can check for that. The second thing it's going to check for is mold, also known as mycotoxins. Mycotoxins are a byproduct that some mold strains can produce, and they're of course toxic, thus the toxins, to your system. And if mold is present, we know in 70% of US homes, the CDC even recognizes mold as being a major factor in 40%, if not the root cause of 40% of asthma cases. I see mold as a layer or the primary driver in probably 80% or more of all the Crohn's, colitis, and IBS clients that I see, diverticulitis, you name it, any kind of bowel itis that we see, mold is implicated in probably 80% of them. So it's a huge, huge issue. So this total tox burden is a combination of tests, and this is one that actually you can get, I'll show you where to get it, but it's from Vibrant Wellness. They'll do a hair tissue mineral, they'll do mold, and they'll even do environmental. I don't know, I'm trying to spell it while I'm talking about it. Anyway, they'll do environmental testing. Now this is going to be microplastics, pesticides, glyphosate, any kind of toxin that's in your environment, forever chemicals, all that stuff it'll measure. For example, I've got clients who I've run environmental toxicity tests on. They live next to a golf course. We just met with a client recently who's down in Chile and they live on a cherry farm. Guess what they spray several times a year? Covering the crops. Now they leave the home and do their best, but it's in their water. They live on well water. It's in their trees, it's in their air, it's in their home, it's in their clothes, it's everywhere. And so these toxins are going to show up high on these types of tests. So we can do an organic acid to give us those 76 markers to check on molds and fungus and bacteria and cellular health and detoxing. The total tox tells us what's actively toxic inside of your system right now that needs to be managed. So it's a combination of hair tissue minerals, so heavy metals and other stuff. We'll check for mold and environmental toxins. The third test that we would look for here, or look to run, the third test is going to be what's called a microbiome, we'll call it a GI map. Now, a GI map is a microbiome test. Now, it's not a perfect microbiome test, and clearly my eraser on the board doesn't work very perfectly either. And here's why. Your microbiome can change quite often. I mean, none of these tests are perfect, but I'm gonna pick on a GI map because they're sort of lauded as like the be all end all, and they're not. A GI map, your microbiome changes on a constant basis. So that's the first thing. The second, there are a lot of microbes which are aerobic and anaerobic. Aerobic means they love oxygen, they can live in your mouth, on your skin, wherever. Anaerobic, the an means without. So they need to be in an environment that's not oxygenated. They're like inside your body, in your intestines, where you're not breathing this air. The problem is your gut is full of anaerobic, so bacteria that do not like an oxygen-rich environment. And when you pass them into a tray to scoop up and put into the kit to send to the lab, they get exposed to oxygen, a lot of them can die. So it's not a super accurate test in that regard. Plus your microbiome changes. If we're looking for certain things in a GI map, we can see good guys and bad guys. We can see fungus, we can see parasites, we can see inflammatory markers, leaky gut markers, gluten sensitivities, all kinds of cool stuff. I can see if you're digesting fats very well, if your pancreas is underperforming. All that can be visible in a GI map that's comprehensive. Not all parasites live in the bowel. So even though they can test for them, we don't always get them even if they're there. So none of these tests are perfect, but they are amazing. The microbiome as well, keep in mind, I did a talk on this recently. Your gut microbiome, that's the ecosystem of bacteria. It's 3 to 5 pounds. In a guy my size, I'm 5'9", 180 pounds. 3 to 5 pounds of me is just bacteria living inside of my gut, which is kind of disgusting. But what happens, it's a self-regulating ecosystem. That means it polices itself. If I feed it well, I go outside, I exercise, I do basic things like that, my microbiome will manage itself. Easy breezy, right? The problem is, my gut microbiome gets messed up. I'm doing a GI map. Again, it's telling me what is happening, where it's happening. So dysbiosis, we call it, and it's in my gut. Doesn't tell me why. So what I need to do is take this in context. I'm not going to say get a stool sample every single time. I rarely test them right away for my clients in very rare circumstances because something upstream caused the issue. Something upstream from stress to toxins to mold to fungus to something else started to overgrow. Even fungus is a byproduct of the microbiome, right? Being inflamed, which allows fungus to overgrow. So something starts at the top, and the downstream effect is a disrupted, dysregulated gut microbiome. So if you're even looking to do a GI map, it might be a waste of money right now because you're looking at the what and the where, but not the why. So here's how these work. And my eraser, I think, has suddenly stopped working. So thank you, Amazon, but that's okay. Yep, I'm just making it worse. Okay. So anyway, here's what we're going to look for. When we're dealing with the context of how they help you identify your root causes, we need to combine them with a few things. So we have to look, number one, your history, or I'll also call it your story. So this gentleman who's living on a cherry farm, he was healthy, one day he wasn't. So we have to look at when the first time was. Was it when they started spraying, when they moved to the farm? Has he been there his entire life? Was there a stressful event? Was there a medical emergency, a use of antibiotics? Was he breastfed? Was he bottle fed? All these things make a difference. Did he have ear infections growing up? Could be mold. There's lots of things we have to look at that can lead to the illness you're having now. When we combine these with the story of how you got to where you are, landmarking every major milestone, right from when you started puberty to when you had your first food poisoning to when you had your first and last antibiotic, how many doses, your whole story, where you lived, what environments you were you near a golf course, in a moldy home, were you in a stressful environment, were you in the military across overseas, were you in a stressful marriage, what was happening that led your body progressively to get ill. And then we can decide, do we want to run a total tox? Maybe just one of those tests in the 3? Do we want to run the organic acid to say, okay, let's look at the markers now. Am I looking for mold? I might run an organic acid for somebody who's not in a moldy environment because we're assessing the cellular damage on the inside. Because mold disrupts cells and it disrupts what's called mitochondria. These are like the battery pack of the cell. There's thousands of them for every cell. They make all of your energy. And if I'm measuring the residual damage from the mold, it can tell me what's going on and what we need to look at. If your bacteria is overgrown, I can see Clostridia, which can be nasty. We can see C. diff, which can kill you. We can see all these things inside these tests. So we have to look at your symptoms or your history and your story, spoiler alert, then we're going to compare with your symptoms. Do your symptoms and your history indicate the need to get one of these lab tests done? If they do, order up. Let's get it done. And all this tells a story. When I interview a client for our program, we have a call that's 30 minutes to an hour long, typically for the first one. And when they join on, I've got probably 200 questions that I send them. I've got food logs. We get photos of them. We'll look at their tongue, fingernails, eyes, all kinds of stuff. We look at their most recent set of blood work, medications they're on, supplements they're taking. It's a very comprehensive assessment. Even the food you're eating and how you respond. Good mood, bad mood, high energy, low energy. All these things are combined that tell us, okay, what's your body doing right now? How is it performing with the things we're giving it under the circumstances? Is stress one of those things that creates a flare-up for you? All this information matters. And so based on the history and the story, then we can decide if we're going to get an OAT, a GI map, or a total tox test. Once we decide what testing we're going for, then we have to establish where those toxins or where that issue is coming from to remove it. And then we simply go through our 5R process. If there's a toxin in the environment like mold, we remove you from the mold or remove the mold from your environment. We have to remove the problem. Then we have to replenish. We talked about the OAT can show us where you're low on nutrients. We have to, of course, replenish those nutrients. That's the second R. We remove, we replenish. Then, of course, your gut lining and microbiome. The GI map can help us with these next two steps, which is rebuild and repair. Rebuild the gut lining, repair the microbiome. And then we can look at rejuvenating your immune system, bringing it back to balance, which is our fifth R. So here's how you can get some testing done. There's a few ways to do this. Now, typically you do need a practitioner. Some places make them available to the public, and there are a few places available like that have been authorized by practitioners. You can just do it. Two things. If you're working with me or another clinician in a program, not all clinicians do these tests for free. Like, you have to pay the lab cost. So an organic acid, for example, they just raised their prices. It's $345, and that comes from Mosaic Diagnostics. Now, you have to be either a physician or a nurse practitioner. I got an account there because I consult for doctors. They gave me one to order for clients and patients. But the OAT is $345. Now, if you were to go to order from a third-party website, you're paying an upcharge of anywhere from probably 20 to even 40%. I've seen much higher. Some clinicians will buy it for $345 and sell it back to you for $700. I've seen that too. Now, the benefit of working with certain practitioners, like my clients will pay the base cost, the $345. You pay the lab directly. We don't take a cent or add a cent onto it. You're spending enough on your health and supplements in your life, right? So that's what we do. But there are third-party tests that will give you some of those options. If we look at the total tox, this one's really neat. I know Vibrant Wellness, who I get these ones from, they do have a bundle. They often will bundle things to save you some money. So if you're to do a mold test, it can be $300 to $400. Hair tissue, another $130. Environmental, another $200. They actually bundle these for something like $500, I believe. And then if you add the GI map, now I'm not a rep for Vibrant Wellness. I just use them for my clients. They have extremely sensitive equipment, have very high accuracies in their testing. But a GI map can also be another $500. But what they do is they'll actually bundle those together. I had a client just order some yesterday. She got her total tox and GI map. Instead of spending like $1,200, they bundled them. After everything was said and done, she spent something like $730 for the bundle. And then the organic acid. She was around, what's that? Just shy of, say, $1,100 that she spent on all of her labs to tell us not what is happening and where, but why. Exactly why. Exactly the damage, all the things that we need. Now, $1,100 can feel like a lot of money. Here's the good news, 90+% of our clients don't actually need any testing at all, at least not right up front, because your story and your history tells us enough. But if you are looking for tests and you are looking to try to, be a lone ranger on this thing, I don't always advise it. Obviously, I'm biased, this is what I do. I've seen people spend tens of thousands of dollars on testing and get nowhere because they haven't had the direction. But if you're well educated and have this down, you spent years doing it, and you're a practitioner yourself, go for it. These tests can be really cheap and affordable. And that's where you can get them from. So you can order them through a practitioner, or again, you can pay an upcharge of some. And this helps cover their fees and their expenses to host websites and stuff. But there's a really great doctor, an osteopath I actually had on my podcast, who I really quite like, a lot of respect for. He's an absolutely brilliant clinician. His name is Dr. Kurt Wohler. And you can check him out on our podcast. We actually talked a bit about labs. That's Kurt Wohler, Woeller. I forget which episode, but you can check it out on the Reversible podcast. He does have a website you can go and order from on your own without anybody. It's called labtestsplus.com. And you can go on, you'll pay the upcharge for them, right? It's not like you're working with me directly, but it's a great place to get labs if you want to cut the middleman out. Of course, our clients get them for the base cost, but that's all part of working with us. There's other expense there anyway. So you kind of got to pick your battles and see what you're looking for and weigh out the best one for you. This is where we get labs from. If you're ready for help and you want help, you want to get some labs done, you want to get these read, build your history, build your story, I'm going to show you exactly how you can get a hold of us. Just check the links below on this video or this podcast episode. There's a link there where you can directly book a call or send me an email. My email's there as well. Very easy to reach me. You can reach me personally. That's josh@gutsolution.ca. And you can get some help that way. Thank you so much for being here. See you next time.